All right, that should do it. Okay, so test 3 study guide. So let's look at the directions for number 1 and number 2. We're not going to do both number 1 and number 2 because number 1 is more closely aligned to your test. So that's the one that we're going to do. Number 2, though, would be fantastic practice for you. And remember that all the answers are right here in the back. So you know if you did it correctly. You can also go onto Blackboard under content and look at mine if you're not sure how I got that answer, so you have it, okay? But number 1 is much closer to your test, so I figured that's the one that we'll do. Okay, directions say, use the quadratic formula. Oh, can you use any other method, even if you get the same answer? No, you have to use quadratic formula. And I'll give you the formula on the board, okay? And it says solve. So what are you going to end up with when all is said and done? X equals your answers. And how many answers are you going to have? 2, because your highest exponent's 2. That's what you get in the quadratic. Now you may end up with just 1 that says plus and minus, right? That's okay. That means there's 2. All right, here we go. I'm going to throw the quadratic formula kind of up here. So remember, that's going to be that opposite of b, the negative b, plus or minus square root, or the radical, b squared, minus 4ac, and the whole thing, not just the radical, the whole thing is over 2a, right? All right, and now we're going to go through, my a is 1, my b is 6, and my c is 13. Everybody got that? And we're just plugging it right in. So we're going to have opposite of b, my b is 6, so I'm going to put in negative 6. Plus or minus, that's how we get our 2 answers. There's your radical. B squared, that would be 6 times 6, that's 36. Minus the number 4 times a times c. And the whole thing is over 2 times a. Okay. All right, here we go. Negative 6 plus or minus. We got to work on this radical here. So I'm just going to kind of go up above it. And let's see, I have 36 minus 4 times 1 times 13. That's 52. It's a weird 52. Sorry, my 5 got weird. Okay, 36 minus 52 is negative 16. So that's what I'm looking at. Can I stop here? No, I got to keep going, right? I can do stuff with that radical. Okay, so negative 6 plus or minus. What am I going to do with a negative under a root? Do the I, right? That's an I. So I'm going to pull out an I. Okay, now I have the square root of 16, which is 4, all over 2. Everybody okay that so far? Getting that? All right. And now what do I have sitting right here? There's our little triangle. I can divide every point of the triangle by 2, and I get negative 3 plus or minus 2i. And that's my answer. Okay, you can leave it just like that, or you can put negative 3 plus 2i, and then negative 3 minus 2i. Okay, is everybody okay with getting that? So your quadratic formula is going to have a negative radicand. You are going to have to pull out an I. That's the difference in 1 and 2. You are going to have to pull out an I. Now yours may not be perfect. Yours may still have some stuff left over under the radical, which is why you may want to practice number 2. But you will have to pull out an I, okay, so that you have it. Okay, everyone all right with that? Okay. All right, let's look at number 3 and 4. Okay. Number 3 and 4 say, use the square root property. This is the one that I feel like if students are going to forget something, this is the one they forget because you may not be familiar with it. But think about the name. If the name is square root property, what are you going to have to do at some point? take a square root, right? So if you forget, just kind of think about that. But before you do anything, you have to isolate. You have to isolate your squared term. So I don't want to see a square root taken right off the bat with number 3. You're going to have to subtract 169 from both sides and get x squared equals negative 169. Okay. Now we're going to apply the square root property, which just means we take the square root of both sides. Okay, how many answers am I supposed to have? 2. How am I going to get 2 answers with this dude? Plus and minus. Okay. I have a negative under a square root. What am I going to do about that? I. Then we take the square root of 169. You can put that right in your calculator. Comes out to be 13. There you go. Okay. So you had to isolate him. Let's do number 4. It's the same thing. We're just practicing it twice. This is one of those. Oh, please.
What's the trick to get this thing to stop squeaking?
Oh, kick, but you're kind of rough, so you might totally break it. But kick the front. Kick the front. No, the tall thing. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there you go.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, not there's anything wrong with that. It's just you be the kind you kick it and it'll fly out and hit me in the head. Okay. So, all right, we're isolating, right? We got our squared term. So now we're ready to take the square root. Okay, now we're good. So x, what are the 2 things you're not going to forget? Plus or minus. You have a negative under there, so we're going to put an I. And then what's the square root of 9? 3. Okay, so the number 1 thing students forget is that plus and minus. And then you've only given me 1 answer, and I got to have 2. Okay, is everybody all right with those? So isolate, root, plus or minus. Check and see if you need an I. You don't need an I. Okay. All right. Number 5 says solve. That's all it says. Well, you can do this 2 different ways. First of all, I can't use the square root method because I have an x, right? So I can't use that. But if you want to factor him, you can factor. He's not a monic, so you're going to have to do the general with and turn it into the 4 term. We're actually going to do that one to practice. What's another way I could solve this if I wanted to? Quadratic formula. You can always solve with quadratic formula. So if all it tells you to do is solve, you have 2 choices, factor or quadratic formula, and it does not matter. You choose the way that works best for you. I'm going to factor him just because I feel like that's what students need practice with. So that's what I'm going to do. If you want to do quadratic formula, go right ahead. Okay, here we go. So if I'm going to factor him, I'm going to ask myself, is there a GCF? There's not. Okay, it's 3 terms. So now I'm going to ask myself, is it a PST? Because that's something we need to ask ourselves. Well, in order to be a PST, this term would have to be a perfect square, but 5 is not a perfect square. I can't take the square root of it. I also can't take the square root of the last one, so it's not a PST. Okay, that means I'm going to give my A, my B, and my C. All right, so remember, we want 2 numbers that multiply together to give us negative 15, because that is A times C. Okay, we want the same 2 numbers to add to give us B, which is a negative 14. All right, well, in order to multiply to get a negative 15, right, 1 has to be positive and 1 has to be negative, and there's only 2 sets of numbers that make a 15. Can I combine 3 and 5 in any way to get a 14? No. So these are the 2 I'm working with. I just have to decide who's positive and who's negative. So if I want to add to give me a negative 14, who's going to be negative? The bigger number, right? The 15, the bigger number. So I'm going to do 1 and negative 15. You can do negative 15 and positive 1 if you want to, right? Everybody remember how to do that? Come up with that? Okay, so if this were a monic, if A was 1, I would take these numbers, throw them into parenthesis packets, and we're good. But this is not 1, which means I'm going to put the letter in the back, and I'm going to rewrite this trinomial, and I'm going to do it as a 4 term. All I did was rewrite the middle. Okay, you can put it in any order you want. Then I'm going to group. Okay. So in this first little packet, I notice I have a GCF of X. So I'm going to divide both sides by X. Both terms. I get 5X plus 1. Over here, I notice I have a negative. I got to pull out a negative. I also notice I have a GCF of 3. So now I'm going to divide both of those terms by -3. Watch your signs. That's going to give you a 5X plus 1. Okay. Everybody good? Okay, the 2 here that I see that they have in common gets pulled out. And then the items that are left over are going to go in the back. Equals 0. Okay, this is a long problem. Everybody okay so far? Am I done? Do I circle this and flip over? What do my directions say? Solve. Ugh, this is one of those that get students. So I'm not done. I now have to take each packet and set it equal to 0 and find my answers. Be super careful with the directions, okay? All right, so here I'm going to subtract 1 from each side. I'm going to divide by 5, and I get an X equals -1/5. Here I just add 3 to both sides, and I get an X equals 3. And now I'm done. So this is one of those problems that is long. You can do this with quadratic formula. You will get the exact same answer. It's just whatever you feel like you're better at. And maybe you have time and you want to do it both ways and just make sure it's right. Whatever you want to do. But just find me your answers. Okay? Everyone okay with that? Is it okay if I turn the page? Okay. All right. So that brings us to our Pythagorean theorem. Okay, number 6. So again, you're already going to have a little picture drawn for you. So your little picture is going to look like this. And then it's going to have some kind of little, I don't know, transmitter box over here. Like that. Okay. And I think they even label, no, they don't, but they do say A, B, C. They do it like that. That's what they tell you. Okay. So that's what you'll be given. Don't even tell me. I don't even have the problem up there. Gracious. Okay. There we go. All right. So remember Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay. This happens to have capital letters. It really does not matter. So an electrician needs to run a cable from the top of a 72-foot tower. Not that it matters, but which letter is 72, A or B? A. To a transmitter box located 54 feet away. Not that it matters, but what letter is 54? B. Now I keep saying it doesn't really matter because all you're going to have to do is find C. So all that really matters is you take the 2 numbers that are in the problem and square them and add them together. That's all you're really going to have to do. Okay. So I'm going to have 72 squared plus 54 squared equals C squared. Okay. I'm going to square each one of these. I don't actually have them separately, but if you square them and add them together, you get 8100. Sorry, I don't have each one separately, but practice that on your calculator. Am I done? Is 8100 my answer? No. Now you have to take the square root of both sides. Am I going to have 2 answers? Am I going to have a plus or minus for this tower length? No, because the negative doesn't make sense. You're only going to have the positive. So when you do that, you actually get 90. If you put 90 feet, that's fantastic. If you put 90, that's also fantastic. I'm not really a units kind of crazy person because it's not science, it's just math. So that's fine. All right, everybody okay on that? Good. Okay. These two, 7 and 8, would be great practice for you. If you wanted to solve these, they're mnemonics. You would need answers. The answers are in the back. So you could do those just for extra practice, but you're not really going to have anything like that on the test. But if you really need practice factoring, 7 and 8 would be great. Okay. All right. I didn't ask, but is it okay if I move paper up? Everybody okay? All right, number 9. Oh, look, we have another one of these square root properties. We thought we were done with those. So remember, isolate your squared term. I can't tell you how many students do not read the directions and they come to this, and because they're so used to seeing this and me yelling at you about the fact that there's 2, that they make 2 parentheses and they FOIL it out. Then they combine terms and they get a trinomial. And then they factor it and they get the answer. But I can't give you credit for it because you didn't use the square root property. So please don't do all that work for nothing. It says use the square root property. Here's your squared term, get it alone, he's alone. Take the square root of both sides. Please, please, please read your directions. So x plus 1 is on the left, all right? Don't forget, you better have a plus and minus on the right. The other side of the squared term, not the squared term, but the other side gets the plus and minus, okay? And then square root of 12. All right, I don't have an I. Why don't I have an I to pull out? I've been pulling out I's like crazy. Yeah, I don't have a negative. Okay, is there a perfect square root of 12? No, but we can fix them a little, right? We can work on it a little. So if you know how to do that, go for it. If you're not sure, break it down. You can use 3 and 4. You can use 6 and 2, whatever you want to do. When I break him down, I'm looking for groups of 2, since it's a square root. There's 2 numbers, okay? And I'm going to have a 3. Who's going to come out? The 2. Who's going to stay in? The 3. That is so difficult for some of you still. Remember, the leftover, the little guy, he's by himself. Put him in the house, okay? Leave him alone, all right? The one that's not part of the group goes under the radical, okay? He goes under the radical. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this as plus or minus 2 root of 3. Okay, am I done? No, because you're only done if you have x equals, and I don't. So now I'm going to have minus 1. Okay, can I combine these terms over here into one thing? No, because they both don't have a radical 3. So your answer, you have 2 choices. You can have 1 plus or minus 2 root of 3. I like that better. Or you can have plus or minus 2 root of 3. Oh, I was supposed to have a minus 1. Sorry, guys. The negative 1. Either one of these answers is perfectly fine because there's not an I involved. So it doesn't matter. Remember, if there's an I involved, it has to go in the back. So I kind of like this better just because that way I'm not confusing what's under the radical, but it really doesn't matter. Okay. All right. Is everybody okay on that? So you'll have a square root property with an I you have to pull out. You'll have a square root property with a squared binomial that you have to work on, like this. Okay. Is that all right? I turn that over. Anybody need a little more time on it? Okay. All right. Here it is again. It's just another way for you to practice. I know I'm killing you practicing stuff, but it says solve. So we're going to have x equals. It says square root property. So you better take the square root. Do not make 2 packets and FOIL them out. Then there's nothing to square root. Can I just throw on some roots, or do I need to do something? I gotta isolate, right? I have a -5 right here. I gotta handle him. So before you do anything else, get that far, okay? Make sure you isolate first. Now I'm gonna take the square root. I'm gonna get z plus 7 on the left. What's gonna go on the right? Plus or minus root of 5. Please don't forget the plus or minus. When you take the square root over there, plus or minus. Okay, can I do anything with square root of 5? Nope. Am I done? Nope. I got a z plus 7, so I got to subtract a 7. Okay, so you have two choices. You can have -7 plus or minus root of 5, or you can have plus or minus root of 5 minus 7. Okay, whichever one of those you like. This one's more widely accepted, but either one of those would be okay. All right, usually they put the radical in the back. Okay, so we've had a lot of solves, right? A lot of solves. Everyone all right with those solves? All the different ways you have to solve. Okay, now we're getting into factor. So now that we're into factor, your answer should end with packets, and you're done. Make sure each packet has been factored completely and there's nothing left inside. So this says factor the following polynomial by grouping. 4 terms, you're going to group. Now, 11 and 12 are the same directions. The only difference in 11 and 12, the reason that I say we're going to do 11 and we're going to skip 12, 12 is for practice, is because of this third term. This third term is negative. This third term is positive. Your third term will be negative. That's why I say let's do this one. Because you know, it's just a little added step. We have to pull out that negative GCF and mess with your signs in that second packet. So this is practice, but this is the one you need to make sure that you're comfortable with. Okay, so there's no GCF for all 4. Grouping means I'm going to group just like this. Remember, this negative belongs to 3C, so he needs to go inside his packet. All right, I notice here a GCF of B, so I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to get C plus 8 for that little guy. All right, now I have a negative I have to pull out, but also a 3. So watch your signs in this second packet. You're dividing a -3, and you're going to get C plus 8. Again, this is the perfect checkpoint. Both of these better be exactly the same. If they're not, don't just say, oh, it'll work out in the end. It ain't gonna work out, okay? You need to go back and fix that. So we'll pull that one out and we'll write what's left. And I do not have to solve them because it just said factor. So I'm done, I can stop. So directions are so important on this test, okay? Is everyone okay with that? If you need more practice, you can practice with 12, okay? All right. Oh, did y'all need it a little longer? Everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, number 13, factor the trinomial. So I'm gonna just get packets and be done. Okay, it's a trinomial. So is there a GCF of all 3 terms? No. Is it a PST? That's the other thing we have to ask with trinomials. Well, x squared is a perfect square. Is 27 a perfect square? No, so it's not a PST, but it doesn't hurt to ask because you do have one on the test. We'll get to it in a minute with practice 2. Okay, so A is 1, B is -12, and C is 27. Okay. Because this is a monic, that means A is 1. I do not have to replace the middle term and go to 4 terms. I don't have to group. I don't have to go through all that. You can, you'll get the same answer, but you don't have to. This means I can go ahead and make my packets. I can throw my letters in the front. And all I have to do is put in those 2 magic numbers in the back and I'm done. So if you know them, throw them in and move on. If you don't, we need 2 numbers that multiply together to give us 27. That's A times C. The same two numbers have to add to give us negative 12. That's B. Okay, let's think about this. So factors of 27, there's only two sets. 1 and 27 and 3 and 9. Okay, they either both have to be positive or they both have to be negative to get a positive 27. If I want to add them to get a negative 12, do we think they'll both be positive or both be negative? Both negative. Which two of these would give us a negative 12 if they were both negative? 3 and 9. You can put them in either negative 9 or negative 3. It certainly doesn't matter. And now you're just going to throw them right in. Okay. Now, if you have time, what are you going to do with this before you move on? If you have time, FOIL that out and see if you go right back again, right? Every single one of these on the entire test can be checked. Okay. All right. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Look at 14. Okay, 14, this whole page we're working on. All right, and they all say factor, 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 factor. So we don't have to find actual answers, we just have to find packets. Okay, oh, so before you're like, oh my gosh, that's huge. I'm gonna have to do 5 times 70 and then look for factors and all that. What should be the first thing you ask yourself? Is there a GCF? Is there a GCF here? Yeah, there certainly is. Ask yourself if there's a GCF. You're going to have GCFs, not on all of them, but on a few. So if I divide every term by the GCF, I'm going to get this nice little trinomial. Boy, that looks nicer. He's even a monic. I don't even have to change the middle term and group. Look how nice that is. Now don't forget your 5. Okay, so I notice he's a monic, which means I can go ahead and make parentheses with my letter in the front, but don't forget your 5. Don't forget your GCF. He has to be part of your answer. Okay, now I just need those 2 magic numbers that'll give me what I want. All right, I'm gonna write everything out. Okay, there we go. I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me a 14 because that's A times C. Bless you. So I'm thinking 1 and 14, or I'm thinking 2 and, I almost said 2 and 9, 2 and 7. I had some kind of brain issue. Okay, they have to add together to give me a negative 9, which is B. Okay, so there's only 2 choices. They give you a positive 14, which means either both have to be positive or both have to be negative. What do we think we need since this is a negative 9? Both negative, this would do it, right? If they were both negative, put them in any order you want. It doesn't matter who's first and who's second, but we do get to throw them right back into the packets. Now, if you have time and you're going to check your answer, forget your 5 for a moment and FOIL this out. Once you get a nice trinomial, then push the 5 through so that you'll go right back to where you started. Okay. All right, everyone okay there? Okay. All right, let's look at 15. Okay, let's compare 14 and 15. Well, first of all, is there a GCF on 15? No. Darn. Okay. Is this a PST? No, because 3x squared is not a perfect square. 4 is, but nothing I can do there. Okay, so if I write my A, B, C, can I go ahead and put packets and throw letters in and go for it? No, because it's not a monic. So that's the difference. Some of you are having trouble knowing when you have to do the 4 term and replace the middle term and when not to. If you have a monic, you do not have to do that. You just go right to the packet. If you have a number in the front that's not 1, that's when you have to do that special thing, okay? Unless you're just super good at factoring. All right, so we're gonna find 2 numbers that multiply together to give us 12, because that's A times C. Well, goodness, 12 has quite a bit, actually. It has 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay. All right, we want the same two numbers to add together to give us 8. Okay, so here we go. We either want both positive or both negative. It is totally 2 and 6. Good, Samia. So 2 and 6, they multiply to give you 12. They add to give you 8. It's 2 and 6. Or 6 and 2, whatever you like. Okay, this was not a monic, so I have to put the letters in the back. Now I'm going to replace 8x. It does not matter what order you replace it in. If you put the 6x first, it's just a little more elegant this way because it has the way that it groups, but you certainly don't have to. Okay. All right, so all I did was replace 8x with my numbers. I have 4 terms. So now I'm going to group. Okay. Here I have a GCF of x that I'm going to pull out. This gives me 3x plus 2. Here I have a plus and a GCF of 2. So if I divide both sides by 2, I get 3x plus 2. That's my checkpoint. They're the same. I'm going to pull that out and leave what's left. And there's my answer. Okay. So this turned into a monic. We did not have to make it 4 terms. This was not a monic. We had to make it 4 terms. And then we had to group it. Okay. Everybody okay with that? The difference there? Okay. All right. 16 and 17 are the same type of problem. And they're both on here for you to practice. You're only going to have one of these, okay, on your test, but they're both on here. These are both PSTs. You do not have to treat them as PSTs if you do not want to. If you don't catch the PST, it is not a big deal. You're going to do it just like you did 15. You're going to do A times C and find the 2 numbers then that add to give you B. That's it. And then you come up with your 2 packets. Your 2 packets will be exactly the same for a PST. But if you are looking for it and you catch it, it's so fast and easy, and then it's not complicated, okay? So let's talk about 16 and 17. There is not a GCF. So my next question would be, is it a PST? So here's how I know. Can I take the square root of the first term perfectly? Sure. I get 5x. Can I take the square root of the last term perfectly? Sure. I get a 3. Okay. The last criteria is that these 2 square roots have to multiply by the number 2. Why? That's just part of the formula. And these multiplied together are going to give me the middle term. Now, don't worry about the middle term sign. Don't worry about the fact that this sign is negative and this sign is positive. Don't worry about the sign. Just, is it the term in general? And it is. So this is a PST. So perfect square in the front, perfect square in the back. These 2 square roots times the number 2 gives you the middle. This gives you 15x times 2 is 30x. We know it's a PST. That means we can make 1 parenthesis with a square. We're going to take this middle sign, happens to be a negative for this one. Put it there. Square root of the first term, square root of the last term, and you're done. Okay. If you didn't catch it and you wanted to go through it the long way, your answer is going to look like this. There's 2 of them. That's okay too. Okay, that's all right too. Everyone okay with that? Let's practice the next one. It's also a PST. You're only going to have 1. Okay, let's see. No GCF. Can I take the square root of the first term? Sure, 2x. Can I take the square root of the last term? Yep, 3. Then what do I do with these two terms? Multiply them, and then multiply by the number 2. This would be 6x times 2 is 12x. Sure enough, that's my middle term. So I get to take a shortcut. I get to do 1 packet squared. My middle term here happens to be negative. If this were plus 12x, I'd put a plus. Square root is the first, for the first term goes here. Square root of the second term goes here, and you're done. If you don't catch it, if you're just gonna go through and do it like 15, no big deal, but that's the way your answer will end, okay? Everybody okay with that PST? So it's not mandatory, it just makes your life easier, okay? All right, you guys okay with that? Any questions? Okay, let's see, 18 would just be practice. If you just want to practice factoring, there's no GCF, he's not a PST, he's not a monic. You will have to turn him into the 4 terms, right? And go through the whole thing. Answers in the back. If you need practice, please, please, please do 18, okay? All right, let's look at 19, 20, 21. 19, 20, 21 all have 2 terms, and they all say to factor, okay? So now we have to decide, are they a difference of squares, or are they a sum or difference of cubes? Okay, well, we don't have any prime on the test, so you're not going to have a sum of cubes. No one's trying to trick you. You're not going to have any of that stuff, okay? All right, so here we go. Is there a GCF here? Nope. These are both perfect squares. That means you have a difference of squares. Plus and a minus goes in. Square root of the first term, what's the square root of 9x squared? 3x. Square root of 100, 10, and you're done. Okay, I get a lot of students that get to this point and they get confused and they think they can just do this. They kind of want to treat it like a PST. This means both packets are the same. Are both signs the same for a difference of squares? No, don't do that. You have 2 packets, different signs. And then if you were to FOIL this back out, remember we did that in class? It all goes down to this. Okay. All right, everyone okay so far? Okay, now we have another one. No GCF, a minus sign with perfect squares. Oh, that gas is getting to me. I don't know about y'all coming in the intake. If you can smell that, if it bothers you, take your mask off. Don't pass out. I'm barely surviving up here without my mask. Okay, maybe the mask is protecting you. If you don't smell it, good for you. Okay, so difference of squares. We're going to have opposite signs. Okay, square root of x squared, square root of 16, and there you go. Okay, you will not have the situation we talked about where you have an exponent of 4. Remember that? You have the hidden difference of squares in that situation. You're not going to have that, so don't worry about that one. Okay, this is the one that gets students. They get down to this point and they get really, really confused and they don't know what they're doing. What is the first question you should ask yourself? Is there a GCF? Okay, sure there is. I have a GCF here of 3b. If I divide each term by 3b, I'm going to get 4a squared minus 1. Don't forget the 1. I get a lot of students, they'll see the GCF, but then they think they're only left with 4a squared. Are we done? No. What's inside this parenthesis? A difference of squares. Now you're going to do that. So keep your GCF, but you do have a difference of squares. Opposite signs. Square root of 4a squared, 2a. What's the square root of 1? 1. And there you go. So this one gets students. Please, please, please be careful. Take your GCF, opposite signs, square root of each term. Okay. All righty. I think we're going to make it. Okay. Everybody good so far? Okay. All right. So this page. Okay. Don't worry about 23. You're not going to have anything with like 23. But we do need to talk about 22 and 24. Okay. With these radical equations. So you have a radical equation, an equation with a radical in it, right? Oh no, I crossed out the wrong one. Sorry. This is why I'm saying you guys wouldn't even tell me if I was about to be murdered or something. Okay, 24 is the wrong one. You're going to have 22 and 23. Sorry, guys. Okay. All right. So with a radical equation, remember you're following these steps, right? These little, my little IRSC corny thing, right? You're going to isolate your radical. You're going to raise both sides to the power of 2 because that's going to be your index. You're going to have a square root. You're going to solve and you're going to check. Okay? Isolate, raise, solve, check. The only stipulation you have, and I'm stressing this because you are going to have it, is that you cannot have an even index, which is a square root, equaling a negative number. Okay? You cannot have an even index equaling a negative number. You just can't. Okay? All right, so here we go. We're going to start with number 22. Number 22, am I isolated? Yeah, the radical's all by his little lonesome. Okay, now I'm going to raise. He's a square root, so his index is 2. I'm going to square both sides. I'm going to get x plus 1 on the left. I'm going to get 25 on the right. I solve for x. I get a nice little 24. These are the only problems you won't have 2 answers for. Okay, you're just going to have a nice little 1 answer because you don't have a squared exponent. Okay, I want you to rewrite 23. So I want you to cross through 23, and I want you to rewrite it like this. Square root of 2x plus 4 equals 0. It's the same problem. I just wanted all the terms on one side because that's how you're going to start out with on your test. Yours is going to look like that. Okay, everybody got it rewritten here? Okay, what's our first step? Isolate. So you're going to have to isolate. So what are you going to have to do? Subtract 4. Ms. Holcomb, it was just written that way. I know, but I wanted you to do it yourself because you're going to have to on the test. Okay. All right. Now, before I jump in and raise and solve and check, what was that little stipulation we said? You can't have an even index equaling a negative number. This means no solution. And you stop. You are going to have 2 radical problems. One that gives you a nice little number that's super easy, and one that's no solution. Okay, you're going to have both. Please, please, please remember, it's not going to appear to be a problem at first. You have to isolate it first, and then hopefully you'll go, oh, no solution. Now, if you didn't, if you forgot, and you went through and did the whole thing, okay, and got x is 8, if you plug it back in, okay, if you plug it back in, 8 times 2 is 16, square root of 16 is 4. 4 plus 4, does that equal 0? Nope. So hopefully you would catch it there, but I don't trust you guys to check your answers, which is why I'm telling you this, okay? So 1 will be a nice number, 1 will be no solution, okay? All right. Everybody okay with that? All right. Last but not least, this is the last regular problem on the test because 26 is a bonus. Factor completely. Do we have a GCF? We got a cube. You will have either a sum or a difference of cubes on here that you're going to have to deal with. So let's practice. You're going to have a binomial and a trinomial. Remember, a 2-term and a 3-term when you factor a cube. You are also then going to need to SOAP your signs. Remember that little rule? Okay. You're going to have 3 signs, 1 for your binomial, 2 for your trinomial. You're going to have the same sign. In this case, positive. You're going to have the opposite sign. In this case, negative. And then regardless, in the back, it's always positive. Okay? Those are your signs. Now, for this binomial, we're going to take the cubed root of the problem. So, cubed root of x cubed, x. Cubed root of 125, 5. Your binomial's done. Okay? For your trinomial, you're going to have that little pattern that we talked about, and it's coming from your binomial. So here we go. We're going to go first term times first term. That's x squared. First term times second term, 5x. Second term times second term, 25. And then you're done. Okay? So you will have a cube. Now, yours may be a minus. The only difference would be if yours is a minus, you would have a minus here and a plus here, right? Okay? So cubed root, first times first, first times second, second times second. Okay, here's your bonus. The bonus is a beautiful problem of everything you've ever learned about factoring shoved into one problem, okay? And I kind of like it. So here we go. It's super easy. You can all do this, okay? But here's what students forget. They'll do the whole top and they forget there's a bottom. Or they do the whole bottom and forget there's a top. You got stuff going on both. So make sure that you're doing both. But this is your bonus. All right, here we go. In the top, do I have a GCF for all 4 terms? No. How do I factor a 4-term? Grouping. That's your only option. When you see 4 terms, you should be thinking grouping. Perfect. Here we go. I'm going to group in the top. Okay. I'm going to leave the bottom alone for a few minutes and we'll come back and deal with him in a minute. Okay. So for this particular packet here, I see a GCF of x squared. Okay. They both have x's. The smallest one is a squared. All right. If I divide an x squared out of both, okay, if I'm dividing x squared out of both, I get x plus 5. Okay. Then I see a minus. Don't forget. Got to pull out a minus, and a GCF of 9. So now I'm dividing out a negative 9. Be super careful there. Watch your signs. That's going to give me x plus 5. Awesome. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going in the top. There's an x plus 5, and there's an x plus 5. I pull it out, and I write what's left in the back. Okay, there's my top. Am I completely done with this top? Did both of those packets look done to you? Teresa's shaking her head. What's happening with this dude over here? He's a difference of squares. You are not done. You're going to have a 4-term that you group, and then one of those little guys is going to be a difference of squares. So we're going to have to keep going with him. You can keep going or you can wait. It's up to you. Okay, so x plus 5 is still along for the ride. Remember, this is just the top. That's why I keep drawing that line, because so many students forget the bottom. What am I going to do about x squared minus 9? 2 packets with opposite signs. Square root of the first term, square root of the second term. There's my top. My top is completely done. That's how your top is going to look. Okay, now I have to deal with the bottom. All right, so I look in the bottom, I realize he's a monic. right? I'm just gonna come over here because it's too confusing to try to deal with him down there. I've just got to remember, I got to put him back right here, right? This is going to have to go back here when all is said and done. Okay, he's a monic. So I know I'm going to have two nice little parentheses with an X in the front. I don't have to do anything crazy and do the 4 term. My A is 1, my B is 2, my C is -15. Okay, I need 2 numbers that multiply together to give me -15. So somebody's going to be positive, somebody's going to be negative. The same 2 numbers have to add together to give me 2. Okay, well, let's think of 15. There's only 2 choices. There we go. What are we thinking? Perfect. -3 and 5. Simi, how'd you know to make the 3 negative? Good. The 2's positive, make your bigger number positive. So a -3 and a 5. Okay, everybody see that? All right, do I need to make it 4 term and go through all that stuff? No, because he's a monic. So I'm just gonna throw these guys right into here. Okay, now remember, that's my denominator. So they're gonna get put right here, right? Okay, should I just circle this and be done, or do we see some other things we could do with that big old chunk? You can cancel stuff out of there. Okay, there's an X plus 5 in the top and an X plus 5 in the bottom. I have an X minus 3 there and an X minus 3 there. What do I end up with? X plus 3. This is actually what we're going to spend the whole last unit of the class doing. You're going to factor top and bottom, and you're going to cancel. That's what we're going to spend the whole rest of the time doing. So, all right, guys, don't leave Miss Holcomb's hips with those donuts back there. Get some more donuts, clean them up. And if you want extra study guides, take some. I made extra copies, so you can have all you want.